Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Actually, good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to Managing Microsoft Teams while staying secure and compliant and overview. My name is Christopher Bryan, and I am a product marketing manager for Microsoft Teams. Part of my scope of work, it's all about our IT Pro admin experience. If you were here for the previous session, this week we announced amazing new capabilities at Enterprise Connect, and I shared a couple of them before. I think one of my favorites is the customized backgrounds. I don't know if you were not here for this session, is the ability to change your background. So I personally cannot wait to join every meeting with a beach background. Should be great. But we also announced a lot of our new capabilities for security and compliance, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into those topics in these sessions as well. From an agenda perspective, we have a lot of content to cover. In this session, we'll start going a little bit deeper into the team's architecture so we can better understand how the building blocks of the service come together to deliver everything that a team needs. We'll then go into a little bit of our security and privacy capabilities, understand how team helps you comply with the requirements of your organization, as well as make sure that your information is protected and secure. And finally, we'll dive into managing team. What does that look like? What are the key tasks that you as an admin may encounter on your day-to-day job? This also means not only first onboarding into Teams. So if you're coming for a different platform, you're just starting your journey in Teams, we'll look into things that you should consider and what are the resources available for you. But also when you are on the platform already and using Teams and everyone is coming together to be more effective, what do you do on an ongoing basis to make sure collaboration continues to be smooth in your enterprise? So with that, let's dive into the architecture. So from an architecture perspective, Teams brings together Office 365 services and our intelligent communication cloud to be able to deliver everything that team needs. Our intelligent communication cloud is that component that enables functionalities such as chat, meetings, voice, and it's leveraged not only by Teams, but also leveraged by services like Skype and other workloads. We also have team services. And this component is more an orchestration layer that we have built as part of the service that kind of like manage some of the functionality between Microsoft 365 services, the intelligent communication clouds, and add things like modern groups. So we can actually have more streamlined membership management, and we ensure that everyone has access to the information they need. For example, access to SharePoint documents. All of that is actually built in the scalable infrastructure that all of you can use today in Azure. And of course, we have our team clients on the top. That is our desktop clients, our mobile clients, as well as our web clients. We're noticing that our team clients are not just simply sitting on top of our team services through APIs, but in some cases, it was more efficient for us to let the clients talk directly to our intelligent communication clouds and Microsoft 365 services. So that's why you see our clients going across. If we look from a logical architecture, teams have different components and different elements that end users interact on a day-to-day basis. If we start with the teams, teams are backed by Office 365 groups. This means that when you add and remove members from that Office 365 groups, those changes are actually reflected in Teams as well. Of course, you're able to add multiple apps in a team. You can add those through our App Store in the client. And we also have a SharePoint instance that is back in a team. So we talked about file storage. That's where we live in terms of our channels. If we move to channels, those are a way for you to organize your collaboration in a way that makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish. For example, if we think about projects, those can be work streams. If we're talking about cross-functional initiatives in your organization, that can be departments. So channels also, it's a way for you to organize collaboration in a way that makes sense for you. Channels also have a corresponding folder in the SharePoint instance. So when you share a file within a channel, that file gets stored in the corresponding file folder in SharePoint. Of course, within channels, you can add multiple tabs, and that allows you to provide easy access to information that people may need on a daily basis, but also tools not only from Microsoft, but also third-party as well. Another thing to note about channels is that's where conversations happened. And a key difference between our channel conversations and our chat that we're going to talk a little bit more later is that conversation channels actually leverage reply chains, so you have that threader conversation happening in channels. And of course, people can add multiple media like images and emojis into their messages. If we look to the left here, our activity feed, that's where we have a personal stream of activity that is relevant for you. Things, for example, if someone mentions you, here it will appear to your activity feed and it will enable you to take action on it. From a chat perspective, you have the ability to add tabs and apps as well. It's worth noticing that the amount of options you have in regards of tabs and chats are smaller compared to those into channels. And finally, we do leverage OneDrive when we think about file storage within private chats. And we'll dive a little bit later into where everything's stored within Microsoft Teams. We have done a lot of investments in our meeting and calling. I have in the meeting before, in the session before, show a little bit of our investments like live events, but we continue to make progress here to make sure that everyone is able to communicate effectively to both call-ins and meetings. So a question that we get often asked from our customers is, I'm having great conversations both in private chats and in open channels. Where are they actually stored? And that's where we wanted to make sure that we address this topic here. Essentially, because we're talking about persistent chat, we have a dedicated storage for it. It currently leverages Azure as is storage. We're moving to Cosmos DB to enable more improvements in performance. Essentially, what happens when you are in a one-to-one chat, those conversations get first saved in that temporary storage in Azure, but also then move to Exchange Online. And what that means is if I'm in a private chat with Aya and Alex, all of those messages are going to be stored in my mailbox as well as their mailbox in a hidden folder. If we talk about channel conversations, it's similar in the sense that they also get stored in the Exchange mailbox. The difference here is because it's an open channel conversation, it actually gets stored in the inbox of the Office 365 group that is attached to that specific team. That allows us to implement things like information protection. In terms of media, things like image and GIFs, we actually have a separate store for it, so they don't get saved in the same place as the rest of the conversations. Now, from a file perspective, and we touched a little bit about this before when we talked about the logical architecture. Depending on where you're sharing files, the storage locations is different. So if I'm in a one-to-one or one-to-many chats, or private chats, if I share a file there, that file is going to be uploaded to my personal OneDrive for Business. And every single member of that that private chat will automatically get the right permissions to access that file. Similarly, if we talk about an open channel conversation, if I add a file to a channel, that file will be stored in the corresponding SharePoint folder in SharePoint. And because the membership of that SharePoint is managed by the same Office 365 group as your team, everyone automatically has access to it. It's also worth noticing that we do support third-party cloud storage, such as Dropbox, Box, Citrix, and Google Drive. Those are actually off by default, so as an admin, you will have to go in and share that, change that so people can actually use it in the settings, and we'll be able to look at what that looks like later on. Now, we touched a little bit on the top three already about messages, images, and files and where they are located. But if we take a look at the rest of the data that you may find in Teams, things like voicemail, calendars, and contacts, as you can imagine, they actually live in Exchange, while things like recording are a little bit different. So when you record a meeting, the actual recording gets stored temporarily in the same kind of media blob where we store some of the other images. And within that storage, what we do is we encode the meeting and we actually move it into stream, so it actually can be consumed by the rest of the organization. Within 24 hours, we actually go back and delete that recording from that storage. Finally, we also have telemetry data. One key thing that I want to mention here is that we do not have any customer data in our telemetry. We are very conscious that information from our customers is something very important for them, and we do not capture that in our logs. So we scrub anything that has to do, for example, email addresses, channel names. We scrub all of that from our telemetry before we save it. Finally, I wanted to mention also here that, as I mentioned before, Teams is backed up by an instance of Office 365 groups. What that allows is admins to have some rich capabilities to manage Teams through those Office 365 groups. So you can actually do key actions such as membership updates. You can actually delete things. You can update properties in the Office 365 group, and by extensions, those are going to be reflected in the Teams as well. From an SLA perspective, most changes will sync within 15 minutes, but our official SLA is 24 hours. Finally, before I move to the other section, I did want to notice that depending on your current environment, there are things that are not available to you, especially if you're using Exchange on-premise or a hybrid version of it. We work really hard to make sure that we provide as much functionality as possible to our customers, but we do have some limitations when we think about on-premise environments. And you will be able to download these slides after the session, but if you're in that case with on-premises technologies, please take a look at this and be aware of what is available to you and what are some of the limitations to the services. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about security and privacy. I think one of the key things for Teams is that with data coming in and out of your organization, you want to make sure that you understand what are the levels of compliance that are available to you, as well as what are the privacy and security capabilities that we're providing you. I mean, at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that since day one, we built Microsoft Teams in a foundation of trust. And from a security perspective, Teams does provide industry-leading capabilities. We do encrypt your data in transit and at rest. We not only have a dedicated set of security professionals monitoring your data, but also we do have a rotating set of penetrating testing happening from people outside the organization to help us discover any vulnerabilities in the product for us to fix it. We also have a bug hunting program where we have anyone can participate, and we provide thousands of dollars if anyone is able to discover a bug for us to be able to fix it. We do address security in multiple levels. As you can see here, at the host level, we have access controls, we have anti-malware. At the network level, we have firewalls, edge routers, and at the facility level, we do have video cameras and actually restrict access as well. On the privacy side, I mentioned this before, but we are very careful to scrub all of the customer data from our logs on any information that we capture in that sense. So we actually have partners and auditors that come and actually review our processes to make sure that we are meeting the promises that we make to our customers, ensuring that your data is your data and it doesn't end up in their logs as well. Finally, one thing I wanted to mention here, probably very, very relevant to this audience, is GDPR. We're compliant with that specific requirement. So we're happy to support that. And we continue to work with our customers to identify any of additional privacy and security needs that they have, so to be able to address it. From a compliance perspective, Microsoft Teams now meets the highest level of certification that Microsoft has for Office 365. We are at parity with SharePoint and Exchange. We have gone through multiple audits, as you can see here, ISO, SOC. If you are in the healthcare industry, high trust, and we have gone all the way through meeting the security and compliance requirements for example, the U.S. government that can use them from like the local governments all the way to Federal and Department of Defense. Now, Teams is available in 181 markets and 44 languages. And we're happy to be able to support in-country data residency for the countries that you can see here. If a customer creates a tenant with Teams after our Go Local initiative have gone live in those countries, the following data will be actually stored at rest within that country. This includes our Teams chats, conversations, messages, the files both stored in SharePoint as well as in OneDrive. For those of us that do not have companies who are based in countries outside the list here, your data will be stored in the regional hub of that specific region. So for example, if a customer were to create a tenant in Brazil, since we don't have in-country resident there, it would be stored in our Americas hub in the United States. One thing that I want to highlight here, as of this Monday, we do support in-country data residency for France. So we're really excited to support our France customers in this journey. So if we take a step back and we look at our journey when it comes into security and compliance, a lot of the functionality has been available to you since day one. When we talk about legal hold, when we talk about reporting, when we talk about e-discovery, those are things that you probably are used to by now. But we continue to make investments and develop more advanced capabilities for you guys. A couple to mention here, retention. I think it's a big piece of a company's information strategy. And that's something that Teams supports, allowing you to define what are the data preservation requirements that your organization have, and being able to define whether it's being able to preserve data for a specific amount of time, or if deleting data after a specific amount of time. And we'll go a little bit deeper about this functionality a little bit later. We also have e-discovery for callings and meetings. And essentially what this offers is a summary of the events of anything that happened, of things that happen in the meeting are available to you. These are very valuable when you think about participating in an investigation or support some of the inquiries from your audit departments in the organization about what happened in a meeting. Another thing to mention here is advanced threat protection. And this is essentially the idea of if you add a file with malware in Teams, being able to immediately recognize that and protect any further damage to happen, as well as being able to detect or implement safe links. So the idea of if a link is shared within Teams, identify that there is a malicious intent behind it and be proactive about blocking it. Finally, a couple of announcements that we make this week, specifically about DLP, data loss prevention, is essentially the idea of protecting your sensitive information from being shared through chats and open channel conversations. We'll dive deep in a little bit about that, but that's a functionality super exciting for us, as well as business information barriers. So if you are in regulated industries such as financial institutions, this is a feature that probably seems familiar to you. And again, we will dive deeper into that in the next slides. But before we move on, I did wanted to address VDI. So if you currently use VDI in your organization, we're super excited. We actually announced at Enterprise Connect that Teams will be supporting VDI starting in April. We're starting with our chat and collaboration capabilities. So Teams will be supported for major VDI environments. And we are working with Citrix to actually add meeting and calling functionality as soon as possible as well. I talked a little bit about retention policies before, but essentially it's the idea for you to be able to define preservation policies for data in your organization. You are able to set retention policies independently for Teams chats and open channel conversations, so giving you that flexibility to determine what makes sense for the requirements that you're trying to meet. One thing I did want to mention here is retention policies for files that are shared within Teams. I actually cover by the retention policies of SharePoint and OneDrive. So when you think holistically about your retention policies strategy in the organization, you want to make sure that you understand, what is going to be covered by Teams retention policies versus SharePoint and OneDrive. Okay. So in terms of data loss prevention, if you have administered Exchange or SharePoint or OneDrive before, these may be very similar, very familiar to you. We're now extending that data loss prevention functionality to Teams for chats and open channel conversations. It leverages the same engine that we use for the rest of the capabilities, and it's proven. The DLP policies that you set apply both for private chat and channel conversations, and essentially it provides you the ability to block messages from being sent based on the policies that you set. We will go deeper into a demo later, but essentially we have a lot of different types and a different regional preset types of sensitive information for you that you can leverage, but you also have the ability to customize those policies depending on your needs. Similar when we talk about retention, DLP policies for files, again, they are also covered by SharePoint and OneDrive policies. So if you're thinking about your large, like your big picture data loss prevention strategy, you have those capabilities as well. When we developed DLP, we're very excited not only to support first-party DLP, but we actually expose APIs for DLP, so third-party vendors can actually develop solutions that work with Team as well. So the final one that I want to talk a little bit deeper into is information barriers. And this is something that we announced in Enterprise Connect as well. Information barriers essentially allow you to control the flow of information within the organization to avoid conflicts of interest. For example, if you're in a financial institution and you have members both on the buy side and the sell side, business information barriers allows you to block that communication and avoid any type of conflicts of interest. There's multiple configurations in which you can implement information barriers. It can be specifically to one group, one specific group cannot talk to another specific group. Or it could be, for example, one specific group cannot communicate to other two groups. So that gives you flexibility to implement information barriers depending on your needs in your organization. So I think I've done a lot of talking right now. So let's go and dive into a demo. For this demo, we'll start with retention policies. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm part of a very conservative organization. I just got out of a conversation with legal and security. Do any of you work with legal security very often? Is that something that you guys do on a daily basis? Are you guys best friends with them? I'm assuming. But retention policies is something that came up, and as a group, we have decided that we need to implement retention policies for 1 year, specifically for Teams chats. So me as an admin, I can come into the Security and Compliance Admin Center and select Create. In here, I can name my policy, add a description as needed. In this case, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that this is about team chats. In the settings, I have a couple of options. I can decide whether I want to retain or delete policies, so preservation and deletion options. Preservation policies are all about, I want to retain the data for X amount of times. That means that even if a user were to delete the data from their end, the information will still be retained. The deletion policies are, on the other hand, about after X amount of time has happened, I want to delete that information, perhaps because it's a liability for the organization. In this case, I talked to my stakeholders, and I want to retain chats for 1 year. Note that you actually have two options in retentions. You can define whether we want have. So let me just zoom a little bit better. Is this a little bit better? Awesome, thank you. You can actually define whether you want to retain the policy based on when it was initially created, or you can actually retain it based on when it was actually last modified. So that can give you a little bit of flexibility on what makes sense for you. You also have the ability to define what to do after that specific period of time has happened. You can say, hey, I don't need the data anymore, so you can delete it. So in my case, everything looks good. I want to make sure that it's retained for 1 year after it's created, and I can click Next. Here you can see that you have multiple options to apply this policy to. In this case, as we talked about, I want to do Teams chats. Know that you actually have additional options here. You can either have a policy applied to everyone. You can use specific users you want to apply to this policy in here. Or you can actually say, hey, I want this policy to apply to everyone, but not to these specific users. So you have the flexibility to address any specific requirements that you have across your organization. Finally, with here, I can review what my policy is and simply click Create, and the policy will be created. So as easy as that, I was able to create a retention policy for my organization. Another feature that we talked about is data loss prevention. And as an admin, part of my job is making sure that our data is protected. In this case, DLP gives me the opportunity to do that. So similarly, in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, under data loss prevention, I can click Policy, and that's when I can create a specific policy. In this case, I was talking to my security department, and they have identified the need to make sure that we protect any data that may be considered financial information in the United Kingdom. So thanks to the templates that we have preloaded here, you can actually search different types of information that we have pre-configured for you. So for example, here you can see that we have some medical and health and financial. I can click financial, and it can show me different regional variants of financial information that I actually can protect. In this case, I was talking about United Kingdom financial data. And as you can see here, it gives me a description of what specific data we're protecting here. We're talking about credit card information, credit card numbers, EU debit card numbers, and SWIFT codes, specifically for the UK. So this looks like the data I want to protect. So I'm going to click Next. Similarly to what we had before, you have the opportunity to name your policy and add a description as needed. In this case, UK financial data works for me. And here you have the opportunity to either apply the DLP policy across the suite. So that means it applies to emails in Exchange, files in OneDrive for Business and SharePoint, as well as Teams, chats, and messages. Or you can choose specific locations. In this case, I want to make sure that we go a little bit deeper into the options. So I'm going to select specific locations. And here, similar to the menu we had before, you have the ability to select targeted experiences and define if you want to target it to a specific set of accounts, exclude some accounts, so you have some flexibility in that case. For the purpose of this demo, I want to just target Teams, chats, and channels. So I'm going to click Next. Under policy settings, here's when you have the opportunity to further customize your DLP policy. As you can see here, you can identify what data it's targeted to be protected. You can edit that if you want to add different additional types. You can also select if you want to protect your data when it's shared within the organization or outside the organization. In this case, let's protect the data for people when it's shared outside the organization. Now, in this view is when you can customize the two sides in terms of communication. Is what does the user see, and why are we communicating to users? And from an admin perspective, I can customize when and what is the incident report email that gets generated. From a user perspective, you can decide if you want to show them tips within the product to make sure they're aware of the DLP policies and help them educate in terms of data protection. You can also send in an email notification, and you can actually go in here in the portal and type specific language that is applicable to them. From the other side, you can actually select when is an incident report relevant for you. In this case, for example, we see that after at least 10 instances of the same sensitive information being captured of detector, an email is sent with the incident report. You also have the ability to customize what is included in that email and actually who that email should go to. And finally, in terms of what I'm trying to protect here, I can actually block the message itself. So by clicking that checkbox, I can actually block the message from being sent and delivered when a user actually types the sensitive information in Teams. Another option that you have as an admin is you sometimes may want to empower users to override your DLP policy. Perhaps it was like a false positive, and there's a specific reason why they actually need to share that information. So DLP within Teams also allows you to configure your policy to empower them both to override and report false positive too. Finally, another great thing that DLP configuration brings to you is you don't have to implement it right away. You have a couple of options. Of course, you can just say, hey, yes, I'm ready to implement this DLP policy in my organization. Let's go. You can also say, no, let me turn it off later. I'll come back to it. But there you actually have the ability to test. And what the testing ability empowers you to is for you to run the DLP policy. It will capture all of the matches that will happen against the policy, and that gives you the opportunity to evaluate the level of impact that this policy will have in your organization before you actually execute it. You can test the DLP policy with or without notifications, giving you that flexibility that you may need as well. Finally, you can review all the settings that you have created. If there's something that you need to go back to, you have the ability to do it. But after that, you can come here, create a DLP policy, and move forward. Okay. So let's switch gears into managing Microsoft Teams, our last topic of this morning. As I mentioned before, there's two main, almost like phases when managing Microsoft Teams. You may be at the beginning of your journey or about you had a couple of steps in and you're trying to figure out how do I onboard my organizations into Teams? What makes sense for me? What resources I have? Or you're already maybe up and running and you're wondering, well, what are the tasks that I should do on a daily basis? And that's what we're going to cover in this section. So if we start from the beginning of your journey, you want to make sure that your network is ready to support the traffic that is going to happen. This is data traffic both from the client to the Office 365 online environment. These are things, for example, like file upload, download, presence. Also traffic from peer-to-peer real-time communication. So a call, a chat, as well as a conference when we talk about meetings. We have great resources to help you understand and evaluate your network to see if it's ready to provide the best user experience to your customers internally. When you have access to this deck after the presentation, that link will tell you into some of those resources. The other thing to take into account is because Team is almost like a window or like essentially a hub to the rest of the Office 365 services. Before you move into Teams, you want to make sure that those services are configured properly to provide the best user experience. That means that you want to take a look at your SharePoint, OneDrive. You want to take a look at your Exchange and make sure that all of those are configured in a way that makes sense for the end user. So now let's take a look at the people who are actually making this happening. So like the admin team. And how do we get them ready to actually implement Teams in the organization? I would say the one thing I would say is critical is if you're part of an admin team that's going to be rolling Microsoft Teams in the organization, please take the time to actually learn how to use the tool, be familiar with the benefits, understand how it plays into your day-to-day work so you can better help your customers, your users understand how they can use it. We have a great set of documentations, both from a technical perspective and also an adoption perspective in successwithteams.com. I would say that's your one-stop shop for critical Teams information. I basically go there every day. We have a lot of constant updates to the documentation, so it's a great place for you to learn the latest in terms of details. We also have great admin roles. When we think about administrators, there's not typically one person who handles everything in the organization. Typically, there's multiple people that come together to craft the end user experience, to deliver the best to the end users. And we want to make sure that each of those team members have the right set of capabilities for what they're trying to accomplish. And that's why we have created 4 different admin roles. We have the Team Service Administrator. This is the highest level of, from an administration role perspective, is the Microsoft Teams workload admin at a global level. They actually have the ability to manage some of the Office 365 groups, and they actually have access to everything in all of the admin tool sets. They have the ability to look at meetings, messagings, or work settings. So they're able to access end-to-end capabilities. When we look at Team Communication Administrator, that's typically the person in your admin team that's dedicated to what is our communication tool set and how do we optimize it to better meet our customer or user requirements. That specific role has the ability to manage conference bridges, assign phone numbers, and is able to access the controls for meetings, voice, in the admin portal for Teams. Finally, the 2 last roles are all about more of your support arm. If you think about a user calling your help desk and they're trying to figure out what specific things are not working from a calling perspective, that Team's communication support specialist typically is like your first level of support. They're able to answer the call, talk to the user, look at their specific calling records and trying to figure out what's wrong. They have access to basic call analytic tools. That Teams communication support engineer has a higher level of access. They're actually able to see the entire company's call record and able to troubleshoot more higher level of issues by looking at advanced analytic tools for calling. And if once you download this, you actually have additional documentation for these roles if you want to dive deeper into what specifically are the actions that are available for each of them. So we talked a little bit about Teams and how it brings together everything in Office 365, but also it empowers you as an admin to manage experience depending on the element that we're trying to address. So if we think about the specific functionality of Teams as it comes to communications, messaging, voice, and calling, those are actually managed from the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. If we're talking about functionality about groups, policies, licensings, identities, those are they're managed through Azure Active Directory. And finally, anything that has to do with security and compliance, you can actually encounter in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. This is where we actually set up those retention policies, those DLP policies. So that's your one-stop shop for security and compliance features. One thing we wanted to also kind of highlight from a framework perspective, there's two types of controls within teams. There are policies and there are configurations. Policies allow you to set a default at the organizational level, but also create additional policies to meet specific requirements and needs in your organization for individual users or departments. So you can have multiple policies, and these policies can be applied to different groups of individuals. On the other hand, configurations are one for the entire company. So when we think about setting them, you want to think about the level of impact that you're having in the organization overall. And with that, I just want to show you a couple of things that we can do to manage teams. Perfect. So the first thing I want to show you, we talked a little bit about the roles that we have available in Microsoft Teams. And I want to start our journey here in Azure Active Directory. So recently, Adele joined my admin team in my company, and she's going to be looking after our communications experience in Microsoft Teams. For that, I want to make sure she has the access that she needs, and I can do that through this admin portal. I simply go into Azure Active Directory. I go into all users, find the users that I'm trying to assign the role to. In this case, is Adele. I can click here, and in here, I can see her profiles, more details about her specific information, but also have the ability to click on directory role and see what additional roles is she assigned, not only for Teams, but globally too. I can click add a role here, and in here I can see all of the roles that are available for me to assign to her, not only for Teams, but overall as well. If I scroll all the way down, I can see here the 4 roles that we talked about. And because we're talking about her managing the communications experience in Teams, I can click the Teams Communication Administrator, select it, and then that role will be assigned to her. Now she has the access she needs to be effective at her role. Now that we have empowered our admin team to be successful, let's talk about the creation of teams. I am part of a very complex organization. We're very much concerned about who can create teams and who cannot create teams. I have talked to multiple of my stakeholders, and we have decided that we want to limit who can actually create teams in our organization. And that's exactly what this specific PowerShell script will be doing, or is doing. What is happening here is we're creating a specific group of individuals that will have the ability to create groups. When you limit the ability to create groups, by extension, you're limiting the ability of creating teams too. One thing to notice is since Office 365 groups actually span more than Teams, it spans like Outlook, it spans Planner, Power BI. When you limit the ability of create teams in here, creating groups in here, you're also limiting or impacting those other experiences as well. So you want to make sure you understand if you're willing to impact those other products as well. As you can see here in the template, essentially, we are creating a template to create this group that will have this ability. And for the rest of it, we essentially are telling, hey, everyone else in the organization, I want to disable the ability to create groups for you. And you can see this in this specific outcome here. So enable group creation is false for everyone in the organization. So how do we know that actually works? If I go in here, I'm actually in the Outlook web app for a user of the company that is not part of the security group that we just, or the group that we just created. That means if the changes that we discussed previously were true, that user should not be able to create a group. So if I try to create a group from here and click group here, the user will be shown with this message that the ability to create a group has been disabled by the person who managed your email. So you can see that the changes have been implemented. So again, that is one way for you when think about governance and onboarding your organization to teams to decide whether you want to have everyone have the ability to create teams or you actually want to restrict it to a specific set of users. For example, it can be only your IT admins. Now, the other thing I want to mention here, as you onboard into teams, a recurring question we get from customers is there any way that I can standardize the naming of teams? And you actually have the ability to create policies for this when you manage the Office 365 groups behind those teams. Essentially, through Azure Active Directory and PowerShell, you can add prefixes and suffixes to the names of the teams, and also block specific words from being used. In this specific PowerShell script, we can see first that in this output, right now we don't have any block words, and we do not have any specific prefix and suffixes. In the code itself, what we're doing, in the script itself, what we're doing is first adding these three words to be blocked. Specifically, nobody in the organization can create teams with those three words: payroll, CEO, and HR. And we also want all of our teams to follow this specific format. We want to make sure that we have the team, the department in the team name, and we also want to make sure that we add the country that is attached to the specific team. Yes, let's try that. It's a little bit better. There we go. Thank you. So essentially what's happening after we implement this PowerShell script is, as you can see here, we have updated our custom block word list to include payroll, CEO, HR, and we have implemented that standard naming of the team as well. Perfect. Okay. So all of the capabilities that we talked about right now are the roles being assigned to users in your admin team, being able to modify who can create teams in your organization through the limitation of who can create groups, as well as the naming policies. All of that happened through Azure Active Directory. So first we use the admin portal, and then we use PowerShell. Now, let's move into actually managing the team experience itself and some of the capabilities that we have available. This is a Microsoft Teams Admin Center, and as I mentioned before, this is where you can control your org-wide settings for Teams, messaging, meetings, and managing your teams overall. A couple of things I want to highlight here. Under org-wide settings, you can control things like external access, or typically also known by federation, and being able to enable people to communicate from your tenant to other tenants with chats and calls. You also have the ability to manage external access and being able to facilitate that collaboration between internal and external people. But I want to just go a little quickly to our team settings, and in here's when you can actually manage some of the key functionality of Teams, being able to decide if you're going to support third-party file storage. As I mentioned before, we do support things like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, etc. And in my case, in my organization, that's not something we want to provide. We just want to stay with OneDrive and SharePoint. So I have the ability to come here and turn all of those off. You also have the ability to control experiences such as the organization tab. In my case, I want to make sure that if someone reaches out to someone else in the organization, they may not be familiar to how they fit in the overall structure. I want to make sure that they're able to access the organizational chart within Teams, so they can figure out where and how they can collaborate. So in this case, I can actually turn this on, and that actually can enable that functionality for people. So I can click Save, and those changes can be made. The other thing I want to highlight here is you have the ability to manage your team upgrade. So in here, you have the ability to select what is the coexistent mode that makes sense for your organization. There are three coexistent modes. They're island modes. Essentially, Teams and Skype for Business are together in the organization side by side, both solutions providing overlapping capabilities. So Skype for Business talks to Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams talks to Microsoft Teams. You also have the ability to do Skype for Business only. Skype for Business is your primary communication and communication tool. And finally, you have Teams only mode. So when you're ready to make that leap and make Teams your main collaboration tool, you're able to do that through here. One thing to note is when you're in Teams only mode, your Skype for Business client will be only used to join existing or new Skype for Business calls scheduled for those who have not been upgraded. Anything else, it's managed through Teams. So your chats, your calls, essentially users will not be able to create meetings in Skype for Business or create a chat or a conversation in Skype for Business. So in my case, organization has been working to migrate people to Teams. I can just clearly select Teams only mode, click Save, and of course it gives me a warning because this is a big change in your tenant. I can understand the change, and click Save. Now let's talk about some of the other experiences that you can manage from the admin center here. One of the things I want to highlight is meeting policies. In here, you can, as I mentioned before, you can create and modify your default meeting policy, or also creating different ones for depending on the requirements of your organization and specific users. In this case, if we take a look at our default, our global meeting policy, I want to make sure that people are able to get up to speed with meetings, even if they were not able to attend it. Right now, meetings are less of a point in time, and it can be more of a thing that you can come back, you can internalize, figure out what was discussed in the meeting, and what are the action items for it. To be able to enable that for my users, I want to make sure that I enable one, meeting recording, and two, transcription. If you were here in this session before, I showcased a little bit about how you can go back into a meeting that was recorded. You can type specific keywords and go into that specific section of the meeting so you don't have to listen to the entire thing. But here in meeting policies, on the audio and video, I can turn on transcription and cloud recording with those two clicks. And with that, you can click Save, and these changes will be made. A couple of things that I want to talk about in meeting policies. Here you can manage, again, your global one, your default one, or create new ones. But from my organization, we are a global organization. And a problem that we're facing is not everyone speaks the same language. So I want to set up an experience in messaging that allows people to work in a way that they feel comfortable in their own language. And for that, I'm going to enable inline translation. Under the message policies, if I scroll down, I'm able to turn on inline translation of messages. I allow users to translate messages. I can click on, save, and now that feature is enabled for everyone. That means that if I write something in Spanish to Aya, Aya doesn't speak Spanish that I know. Maybe she does. No, she doesn't. She's able to go in, translate it into English, or the default language on her client, and being able to further communicate with me. Finally, I want to showcase your management of teams in the organization. In this view, you're able to see every single team that has been created in your organization. You're able to manage your properties. You're able to support users when they have troubles. That gives you good visibility into how people are coming together in your organization. One of the most interesting use cases is all about when a team was created, only had one owner, and that owner actually left left the job, is on vacations, and the way that it's set up, it may be that members cannot make the changes they need to enable collaboration. As you can see here on the DG2000 product team, there is a warning sign, and in this case, the individual that was the owner of that team actually left the company. So now we have what we call an orphan team. As an admin, I can come in here into the team, review the details of the team, all the information, who's the owner, who's the member, and in here I can see that everyone in this team is a member, so no one is an owner, as signaled before. I can simply see, for example, hey, Alex, I'm going to make you the owner of this team. And by changing that to owner, now I'm empowering the users again to make those changes they need to be effective. Okay, and with that, that was some of the capabilities that I want to show you from a demo perspective. So we can go back and talk about the rest of our manageability discussion. So a couple of things of the things we saw today, you do have the ability to limit it, who can create teams. This is not something that we recommend. We fully acknowledge that there are companies out there that do have that strong requirement to meet, and we want to support you in that journey. That's why, as you can see, we do empower you the ability to do that. There are negative effects in terms of this. It can hinder your collaboration as it introduces friction in the process of people coming together to create a space so they can collaborate. So you want to take that into account if you decided to pursue that route. As we talked before, you can also standardize your naming in Teams by blocking words or actually adding prefixes and suffixes. As the same as the previous one, you want to make sure that you actually have the right licenses for this. It does require an Azure Premium P1 license. But it's something that is available to you if needed. Team settings. This is when you can control key features of Teams, such as email integration, the cloud storage. This is where we went back and we disable some of the things for Dropbox, Google Drive, etc. And you can actually manage the device setup. Things you want to consider here: do you want to support an environment with third-party cloud storage, or do you want to simplify and focus on a specific solution for your users? Things like, is scope search important for you? Do you have policies in Exchange that you want to make sure they're replicated in Teams as well? Message policies, here's when you can control the experience for users for chats and channel conversations and messages. This is where we changed or activated translation of messages, but you also can manage things like GIFs and stickers, and is that appropriate for your culture? Do you want to humanize a little bit of your workplace? You have the capability in here as well. Meeting policies is all about what features are available for users when they actually join a meeting. In this case, we talked about enabling recording and enabling transcription. You want to make sure that you understand, if you're limiting some of the functionality, is there a specific reason for it? We typically see that the more functionality you enable, the richer the collaboration in meetings too. This is just a list of controls for you. It's a good guidance so you have a sense of what to manage where. So for example, if you were talking about meetings, it happens in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, and you have controls over policies, configurations, similar to the rest of the capabilities for messaging, team collaboration, and security and compliance. You will have this slide on the deck for you to access later. So it's also a good cheat sheet to have around. So let's talk about onboarding a little bit deeper. So when you're onboarding into Teams, you want to consider multiple things. You want to make sure that you know where you're coming from. Is Teams a whole different capability for your organization? Are you moving from Skype for Business Online to Teams? We have great documentation to help you navigate this journey. For example, if you are moving from Skype for Business Online or premise, there's documentation here that you have access in the slides. If you want to set up voice within Teams, you have documentation for that as well. And I think one of the biggest things when implementing Teams, and there's a great session later today about driving adoption of Teams, change management, user adoption is key. We do have a good set of tips, tricks, guidance on how to accomplish that in our documentation as well. There are two approaches to onboarding. I think both have their valid place, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what the requirements for your organizations are. But essentially, there's the organic approach where users identify that they need a team and they're able to come into the tool and create it, which is the experience on the left. And there's the IT-driven onboarding. That's when IT has identified the need for specific teams and is able to proactively create that for the user. And we have actually empower IT admins with tools to be able to do both. I think you can still have IT-driven onboarding when you actually set specific teams for your users, but also letting them also create teams as they see fit too. We do have great PowerShell commands available for you and Graph APIs that allow you to automate some of the team lifecycle actions such as creating, deleting, updating, etc. From an ongoing perspective, I know we're running a little bit short time, so I just want to call out, these are some of the things that you may encounter as you go into business as usual in your organization for teams. Being able to troubleshoot some of the call with call analytics and quality dashboards. Organizations are very fluid and they evolve, so you may have to revisit some of the initial policies that you had set up. So for example, initially maybe guest access wasn't a need or wasn't important enough for you. Maybe collaboration with external vendor or customers become a critical part of your business. So now you can go back and enable that for your tenant. And finally, you can manage teams in your organization. This is something that we did in an example when we recover an orphan team, so you are able to help your users if they need any assistance with their teams. Guest access, I briefly touched on this. If your organization is big into collaborating with customers, collaborating with vendors, it's something that you want to consider. We have seen great results in terms of collaboration and productivity overall when companies enable these feature. I know that there is some security and compliance conversations need to happen within the organization, but it's something that you definitely want to consider in your strategy. Finally, tool sets for ongoing. For the key tasks that we talked about, the call analytics, the management teams, and reviewing your policies. Great cheat sheet for that. And before we leave today, I wanted to highlight we do have a workshop today and tomorrow called A Day in the Life of a Teams Admin. It gives you the opportunity to take the business requirement that have been identified in a company and translate it into Teams settings and policies. So if you're interested to having hands-on experience, it's a great place to have that. And finally, in terms of resources, I wanted to keep it very simple for you guys. Successwithteam.com's one-stop shop, great technical documentation, adoption information, and we have some great skill enablement sessions with decks and topics around architecture, IT pro, etc. In Coffee in the Cloud. And with that, I'll be here around if you guys have any questions. We have experts too. Thank you for your time and have a great Ignite.